jailhouse attorney, they all laughed at me. And I expected that initially, but later on when I thought about it, it did, you know, it did affect me, it hurt. But I also had told them that I wasn't certified by the bar, I was certified behind bars. And to me, that made me more of an actual of an attorney and advocate than them. You know, this term jailhouse attorney is kind of elusive, right? You know, what is it? What does it actually mean? You know, it's basically somebody who's incarcerated, and they don't have to have a college degree. They don't have to have a high school diploma. They don't even have to have a GED. And I know right now when you were saying that, you know, Jason was doing this when he was incarcerated, I like to tell people that my advocacy, I started advocating while I was incarcerated. 8x6 cell, life without parole, 320 years, one of the worst prisons in the United States. And I was able to put my own clemency petition together, and I was able to convince the President of the United States to not only read my petition, but to grant it, to grant my release. And I think if I can do that from a prison cell, imagine what it would be, right? I wasn't going to wait until I got out of prison. I wasn't going to wait until I got a degree to try to make change, and that's what I want to let you know that, right? Because I heard what you just said right now, and don't let nobody tell you, like, you got to wait till you become till you get your PhD, or till you become an attorney to make change. You can make change right now, right? I think that's evident with Greta Thunberg, right? 16-year-old activist, and I was formerly incarcerated, but just like she said, I see my incarceration as she has Asperger's syndrome, and she don't look at that as that holding her down. That's like her superpower. I see us being this formerly incarcerated, that we have this superpower, that we can see things in a different perspective, that people who, and not to put professors or people like that in a different category, because they're not, because we need both perspectives. But I think that we bring something valuable to the table that you can't bring unless you've been in that situation, or you've had a loved one in that situation. And like Jody said, the jailhouse attorney is just more than somebody who is an attorney in there for everybody. I had seen myself more as like I was the guardian of the civil rights in there, of everybody's civil rights. If you went to chow hall and your cereal or your oatmeal had maggots in it or flies, you don't call the ACLU. You don't call the NAACP. If you did that, they're not going to listen to you anyway. You go. No disrespect to the ACLU. I love you people. You run to your jailhouse attorney and you tell him, right? If you've been in segregation, if you've been in lockdown for 2 months or a year for no reason, you don't get out. You don't call the ACLU or an attorney. You go to the jailhouse attorney. If you've been abused or beat by officers, you go to your jailhouse attorney. They're the ones that are the protector of the rights in there. But they're also more, I see them as well. I saw myself as they look at attorney as a counselor. I saw myself as an actual counselor because I dealt with prisoners who were going through divorce, that were losing their kids. I did more than legal work. I did divorces, which unfortunately is pretty high in prison for obvious reasons. But parental rights, termination of, because even when you go to prison, if you have kids, they still accumulate your child support. So these guys some of them would rack up $100,000 that they would have to pay. So we would try to take that to court and try to modify it. But with being a jailhouse attorney, there comes a lot of, what would you say, like a lot of drawback. Because the jailhouse attorney is somebody who is not welcomed by the guards or by the staff, because that's who your majority is making your claims against. So somebody who is good, you become a target by the staff. It's it's routine for an officer to go into your cell one day and to find a knife in there that's not even yours, that they plant in there. They plant that knife in there. They put you in the shoe. When they put you in the shoe, they throw away all your legal work. They have you in the shoe. They tell you that they're going to transfer you because your life's in danger. Somebody's going to kill you. There's no way that you can find out if that's true or not. They keep you back there 6, 9 months or a year. Send you to another prison. That warden hears about you. He don't want you at that prison. they make up some type of lie, well, you know what, we can't have you here either because Bird traveled over here, something that you did, even though you didn't do nothing. We're gonna keep you in the shoe and we're gonna transfer you. So they call it diesel therapy. That's something that you can go through 3, 4, 5, even 9 years while you're incarcerated. So you know, just when I think about the jailhouse attorney and how important they are and how underappreciated they are, right? And then when you come out here, you can't even practice law like yourself. Right? If you look at a lot of the litigation that a lot of organizations do when it comes to prison, a lot of it is started by jailhouse attorneys. But when it makes that round and it gets to a court, and the judge feels that you have a claim that's viable, they're not going to allow you to be represented by your jailhouse attorney. They're going to bring another counsel in. And the person who did all that work trying to get that case there, they're kind of like just pushed away from it. You can't be part of the interview process. You can't help in investigation, trying to get up documents. Everything is you're just because you don't have that license, you can't practice in that court. If you go to Louisiana, Angola has a prison. They have their own innocence project inside the prison that the prisoners have started, and they do the filtering process. And once they find these claims of these guys that are actually innocent, then they send them to the innocence project. And then the innocence project, which is great because they're the ones that litigate them. But then these guys that are in prison that are doing all the hard work, it's not about getting acknowledged, but it's just about about empowering them, right? Giving them that belief that they're just not in there in prison, but that they're making a change, that they're making a difference. What I'm working on right now, I'm a 2018 Source Justice Fellow. What I'm creating right now is a curriculum and a toolkit that will teach federal and state prisoners how to do their own clemency petitions. I filed my own clemency petition. I did everything that you could possibly file while I was incarcerated. Direct appeal, written certiorari's, 265s, 3582C2, Rule 60Bs. I did a curriculum. You named it, I filed it. But it prepared me. What that did was prepare me to put my clemency petition together, to be able to see what the Pardon Attorney's Office, what President Obama, what they were looking for, and what they weren't looking for. I believe that I was able, through reading those hundreds and hundreds of books in there. They had books, right? They're about that thick. They had second spin thirds. Just reading them, it prepared me to put this petition together, and I put it together like my life depended on it, because in fact it did. So what I want to do with because there's some amazing people that are incarcerated, some of the most intelligent, charismatic, passionate people that I've met are in prison. I want to teach them, I want to give them the tools on how to not only do their own clemency petitions, but how to advocate, how to do campaigns from prison, even if they don't have anybody on the outside. But if they do have family on the outside, what I want to do as well, the toolkit, the curriculum will teach the families how to advocate, how to do clemency campaigns for their loved ones that are incarcerated, so they can act in conjunction. Where you don't have to wait for an organization to come by and say that we're going to fight for you. Because one thing that I know about people that are in prison and families who have a loved one that's incarcerated, that they don't care if it's a weekend or a holiday. They don't care if the president or the Republican the president or the governor is a Democrat or a governor, that they're going to fight for their loved one. They don't care if their loved one is in there for a violent offense or a non-violent offense, but they're going to fight, right? And that's what I want to do. I want to empower them, give them the tools to take their lives in their own hands, right? To show people why you do deserve a second chance. Don't let nobody tell you that you do or that you don't, right? You show them why you do. So that's what I'm doing through my 2018 Soros Justice Fellowship. My sister Jody over there, I think what she's doing is amazing, and that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Jason. Let me start like this. On election night, 1992, I was arrested for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, basically joyride, right? And because that was my third offense, I was convinced by my court-appointed lawyer that a 25-year sentence was the minimum that I could get. You know, he adamantly talked me into not taking that case to trial. And, you know, not having any legal knowledge or anything, you know, I figured 25 is better than 99, so why not, right? To this day, I'm still living the collateral consequences of that mistake, you know, accepting that sentence. And that's exactly what it was. I accepted it. You know, a lot of times in prison, we would go around and we talk about the judge gave me this and the judge gave me that, and that's not entirely true. You know, the problem is that we did not have the knowledge about the law. We did not have knowledge about how Texas has a bifurcated criminal justice system where they can't bring up my past until they prove me guilty on the charge. But I was tricked into believing something else, right? So I took that. Let me start off with a hypothetical to kind of bring this all into context. If somebody in here broke their leg, what type of sentence do you think they should get for that? Or cancer? If somebody was diagnosed with cancer, you know, that's a biggie. Is that something that warrants a 99-year sentence? You know, I know that sounds awfully ridiculous, but from what I've seen, from my experience on the inside, that's exactly what the Texas criminal justice system has been doing. We've been criminalizing issues that are largely health issues. You know, I mean, I did from that sentence that I mentioned earlier, I did 8 years, 5 months, and 16 days on the inside, right? And I saw so many people in there, so many talented people, smart people in there who should not have been there. Who just should not have been there at all. So, you know, going back to this court-appointed attorney deal, that's one of the reasons why I agreed to be on this panel with Jody, and one of the reasons why I went out of state to get my law degree. It's because people need to hear that, especially people who have been incarcerated before. You know, I was told time and time and time again that this is what it is, and that's it. You can't study law because you have felonies on your record, and that's it, right? And it's not true. I found that in that system that I was in back then, and I believe that it's still pretty much like that, you know, we used to have a running joke coming from the Richard Pryor joke that, you know, if a person of color went to jail looking for justice, that's what he found. Just us. Just us people of color in there. And it was so true, you know. And why was that? Why was it? I know I didn't see for a long, long time, I didn't see a person of color that was an attorney. You know, and I'm not going to drag race into it or anything like that, but I couldn't help but to notice, you know what I mean, that all of us were in there, and all of them were out there representing us, and erroneously giving us information like, if you don't take that 25-year sentence, they're going to give you life, and you'll never see the light of day. So, I discovered when I was in law school this thing that they call judicial economy, right? And that's when everything really started making sense to me. You know, I had a civil procedure professor that used to always joke that the judge doesn't want to hear that shit. The judge just wants to make that 12 o'clock tea time at the country club. And it kind of made sense how we cycle so many people so fast through this plea bargaining system, you know, just to clear up these dockets, right? I really realized that guilt or innocence is really not the thing. You know, it's kind of like, let's make a deal. You know, what will you accept? That's not justice. That's not justice at all. But today, you know, I work for the Texas Jail Project, which is a small nonprofit organization based here in Austin. And we advocate for and empower families that have a loved one on the inside that are going through exactly what I went through. You know, they're getting all this false information and stuff like that, and you know, one of my roles is to help them, to help them to be able to navigate that, and to help them to be able to find the services that they need. You know, I talked about it earlier. We criminalizing what should be a public health issue. You know, mental health. Right now, that's one of the biggest things that's going on in the Texas criminal justice system. That's where you're reading about stuff all the time. These large percentages of people being held in jail and prison who probably should be getting psychiatric services, right? So, that's what I do, that's what I bring to the table with our organization. I mean, it's daily, I take calls and emails and stuff like that from families who are just totally freaked out because their son or their daughter got picked up because they're in a mental health crisis. And let me just say this, that calling the police when somebody's in a mental health crisis is probably not the best thing to do. You know, it's not, because you're gonna have a bigger problem on that. But I get these calls and everything, and it's like, okay, let me see what I can do. You know, and I figure out what local mental health authority they're situated in. And we basically try to bridge the gap. We try to provide the services that those court-appointed lawyers won't. They won't. Most court-appointed lawyers are gonna do the bare minimum. They're gonna go in front of the bench and they're gonna say, yes, Your Honor, I represent the defendant. And that's it. And they're gonna wait on the state's attorney to see what kind of offer they're gonna make. You know, so my role at Texas Jail Project is to try to empower families and you know, people being affected by these various issues, you know, that you can be helped. You know, just like people told me I couldn't go to law school, you know, I just don't believe a lot of the crap, you know, that people put out there nowadays. You know, where there's a will, there's a way. You know, this man got clemency out of there. I know Lauren's story, I know David's story. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. So.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect transition to Lauren's work. Okay, awesome.
So I do work at the ACLU of Texas. I am not indeed an attorney, and I have to constantly make that disclaimer. And interestingly enough, like, we do get a lot of letters, maybe about maggots, but for sure about other stuff. And so, but it's always so, it's such an interesting dynamic to me to think of like how many letters organizations like the ACLU get from people in jails and prisons across America. And just a few weeks ago, our national office had contacted our local office and was like, hey, there's this really egregious thing happening in a women's prison, and like, we want to do something about it. And so, you know, they wanted to like go hard, and I was like, of all the it wasn't, so it was something bad. And like, we live in the prison world where there's sadly really awful things happening every day. And so the need to prioritize what, like, I've also gotten complaints about them not following the calendar, or the food menu calendar, which is really interesting considering the panel we just had, right? Because like, food is really important to people. And if you didn't get the exact right thing to eat, but you still got food, and there's somebody else that's like dying, like, we have to prioritize. And so this letter, they were ready to go full throttle on this thing that was not great, and it was still like not the most egregious thing that's happening inside a prison right now. And I just kind of was enthralled in this idea of, what must it feel like to be the person that writes the ACLU and gets like 5 of their team members working on your thing, right? Like, maybe this person doesn't know how awesome that is, that they had accomplished that goal, but that's pretty awesome. Because I know too many people from the inside sitting there like writing 5 letters a day to random organizations just in the hopes that somebody will respond and somebody will do something about whatever is going on. I currently do a kind of mix of community organizing and policy work at the ACLU. So we work at the legislature to try to change policies that could potentially impact, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. It's a long, slow, grueling process, but in the context of legal empowerment as abolition, like the real work is like going into the communities and illuminating for people the power that they are often unaware that they hold. So that they can make the change. Like, it's not going to be me fighting at the hallways of the Capitol, right? It's going to be the people that are in the communities across the state that like rise up and say, actually, you work for us, and this is what we want. That's how we're going to affect the change. So this last legislative session, I worked on very specific stuff pertaining to women's justice. Texas, Texas is not like most other states where, you know, men dominate our prison system. They have 90-ish% of the prison population. And even though women are the fastest growing part of the population, we're still such a small percentage that the focus is not on us, right? When they think about programs, when they think about architectural design, when they think about reentry services or vocational training, or every step of the process is really focused and built and designed for men. And so we worked on a handful of policies this last session at the legislature that would have tried to divert women, specifically primary caretakers of young children. It would not have just applied to men, but it largely would have applied to, or women, but it would have largely applied to them. And then for the women that have to be inside of jail and prisons, like, we wanted them to be treated with just the slightest modicum of dignity. And so, you know, it's a term that you hear being talked about all across the nation right now, dignity for incarcerated women, but when you hear it, you're often hearing them talk about two primary components, and that is like feminine hygiene products and shackling, which are the kind of the highlights, right? Like, it's kind of egregious to think about a woman in labor being shackled to a bed, and yet it happens, and yet we're having to fight against that happening in incarceration. And then, like, it's the year 2019, and we're still having to fight for feminine hygiene products, like to not have to beg for them, to not have to have all these embarrassing moments, but just this very small modicum of just dignity. But the argument that I'll be making at our next conference is that dignity for incarcerated women means a lot more than just the bare minimum, right? Like, it's gonna take us a lot of work just to get women to kind of the starting line of opportunities and dignity that men get inside of this system. And at the same time, like, we want to make these shifts inside of the system, and we also want to get people out of it. And so those are kind of the big things that I've been working on this last session. I will say that, you know, I kind of, it's a happy, purposeful accident that I'm sitting here today. You know, thinking about kind of what you were saying earlier, this idea of community and the justice, and so from my entry point into all of this to sitting here today was, you know, in 2011, I had just gotten out of prison for my last sentence, and I remember very vividly, like, vacuuming the carpet and, like, trying to get the kids to not mess up the furniture or something, and on the news they're talking about laws that are being passed, and looking back, I can see how much that felt like it didn't impact my life. It didn't feel like something that I needed to pay attention to, and it certainly didn't feel like something that I could have an impact on. And shortly thereafter, I live in eastern Travis County, so kind of smack dab in between Manor and Del Valley, and we have a private water company that charges, like, my last water bill was $240. And that's just for water. That's not electric, that's not trash, it's not anything but water. And it's crap water. Like, I go through 4 coffee pots a year. Like, my dog dish, you can see, like, little white rings around it. And they wanted to raise our water rates, like, 3 times over the course of the next 3 years, and they were trying to quietly usher it in. And the community did an uprising. And, you know, I'm part of the Facebook neighborhood pages just because I'm nosy like everybody else. And they were like, we need all the bodies to show up at the Capitol for this hearing. And so I was like, well, I don't want my water rates to go up, and I have nothing better to do tomorrow than to sit there and stare them down, so I'll go do that. And, you know, sitting in the gallery that day, so, you know, I will admit to buying into some conspiracy theories after the 2000 elections. I don't know if everybody in here knows what happened in the 2000 election, but we didn't know who the president was for a couple of months, and then when we finally did know, it was based on votes out of Florida, where his brother was the governor, and it just seemed really fishy to my young mind. Even my adult mind is still and so I had not had faith in politics or politicians or policy at all until that moment when I'm sitting there and I'm watching these elected representatives, like, actually fighting for the people and asking the water company really hard and direct questions and, like, actually fighting for us, the community. And so it was that moment of understanding like, oh yeah, it's your job. It's your job to represent us. So that kind of set me forward on a pathway to getting to do legislative advocacy work and meeting some really amazing people along the way. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
I'll take it as a compliment that was how you ended, since we met along the way. So my name's David Johnson, and I work with grassroots leadership and Texas Advocates for Justice. And so, first off, I want to say there was a word that came up in your slides that I had this response to, this visceral response, and it was citizenship. Because citizenship is this concept that is this very safe, patriotic word. There's a lot of bias built into that word. Because if your citizenship is effectively diminished through legal means, then it's okay on a social level to diminish the humanity with which and the dignity with which you treat human beings. We see in the media today talk about whether or not someone is legal or illegal, when really they're a human being, and last time I checked, it was never illegal to be a human being. And nothing about that should determine whether or not you are treated with dignity and humanity. We talk about things as rights when truly, systemically, we treat them as privileges because all it takes is an individual having the wrong interaction with the criminal justice system to lose those rights. And I tell people all the time, if it can be taken away from me, then it's not a right, it's a privilege. Call it what it is. And if you're trying to not have my formerly incarcerated but vote or own a handgun, then call it what it is. Not saying I want a handgun, but I'm really tired of hearing people talk about Second Amendment rights and then to be reminded that part of the Bill of Rights doesn't necessarily apply to me. And it's indicative of a desire, in my opinion, of a classist, racist governmental system to keep us from really having full ownership in the fabric of life. My first method of engagement with regard to legal empowerment was through legislative advocacy and working at the ledge, and that was a mind-blowing experience. A mind-blowing experience. I'm very glad that I was able to learn from individuals like Lauren and a number of emails, Jorge right there, that I shared where I got to learn from his past experience, because the confines of power do not wish to make access to knowledge any easier than they have to. Because ignorance is usually what is ensconced in power, and ignorance is threatened by knowledge. And so it only serves the ignorant power mongers to keep us from having access to knowledge of how to navigate the legal system, knowledge of how to effectively advocate for what's in our best interest or the best interest of our communities. Before this past ledge, which was in '86, the only reason I knew that Texas numbered its legislative sessions was because I was in prison and I was what was called a writ writer. It was the other term for jailhouse lawyer. And I knew that dependent upon which legislature, under which legislature someone was sentenced, they had access to certain guidelines, or they were able to get out early, sooner or later. And the only reason I had any experience as a writ writer was because I could type, I could understand obscure Latin-based English words, and I was creative. But I also listened to individuals who, as Jody pointed out, had life terms. And let's be honest, if you're sentenced to anything over 30 years and you're over 30 years old, that might as well be a life sentence, because whether or not you ever get out is up to the state. So if you're sentenced to 30 years, like one of my colleagues, Robert Lilly, was recently sentenced to 30 years after being enhanced as a habitual for evading arrest in a motor vehicle. Robert Lilly is in his late 40s. That is a life sentence. And there is no way you can justify someone being sentenced to life incarceration, a lifetime of incarceration, because of, well, really anything, in my opinion. Because I feel like we forget that we as a community have an ownership in what comes out of us. All crimes are really things that we don't know how to handle, and they're usually the result of trauma. And we live in a society that traumatizes itself. The commoditization of trauma has done us a disservice from which we are struggling to rebound. The commoditization of knowledge, such as legal expertise, has been used to keep individuals under the boot of government. The fact that, I think what it's Kansas, Mississippi, and Texas are the three states that have currently some type of ban or restriction on the books for individuals with felony convictions on their background from practicing law. And the thought that you have to, if in those states, if you want to practice law, you have to jump through an inordinate number of hoops and kiss a countless number of butts just to prove that you deserve to do something that most individuals who practice in that field already have questionable moral standing to begin with. My wife has been a legal professional for 25 years. My mother-in-law was part of the original class of board certified family law paralegals in Texas. She grandfathered in before they required, so she wasn't required having a 4-year degree. And I can tell you from private socialization with attorneys, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of socioeconomic status, there is something wrong with you if you practice law. The question is whether the thing wrong, how it manifests itself. You are either horribly selfish and cynical and manipulative and exploitational and materialistic, or you are hopelessly idealistic. But the ratio is like 9-1, which ironically is the same ratio of individuals who are actually guilty that are sentenced to death and individuals who are innocent. And I do a quick transition there because we rush people through a criminal justice process that gives them more time than they should ever have, so that the fools that we voted into office can go and grandstand and say, look what we've done for public safety. But I'm 43 years old and my community is markedly less safe, regardless of the definition you put in that 4-letter word, than it was when I was a kid. So how is this working? How is this working?